Good evening. This is Maestro Cortello with a Company of Heroes 2 cast. Today we have a 1v1. Our first player is called WarBoss. He is playing as the Ostheer, or the Ostheer. And the player on the other side right here is VindicareX, playing as the Soviet Union. So, if you are a Dawn of War 2 player, you probably recognize VindicareX. He was one of the best Dawn of War 2 players before he kind of just up and quit for whatever reason. Not that he made a big deal about it. He just kind of disappeared from the scene, but there was definitely a time when Vindicare, I'd say, was pretty much the second best player around. He was very successful in the Dawn of War 2 tournament scene. He was pretty much the second best behind Holy Hammer, and this was a bit before Toy La Li kind of rose to the top. So I'm very interested to see how well he plays in Company of Heroes 2, how he's transitioning to a new but similar game. He's certainly a very high-level gamer and a fierce competitor. His brother was a Dawn of War 2 player and was also very good at it. And I've even seen one replay where they teamed up together, so it seems like they're both playing this game. His brother went by Decisive. And then, interestingly, it's also kind of funny that the other player in this game, WarBoss, his name is WarBoss, which is a Dawn of War or a Warhammer 40k, kind of a Warhammer 40k reference. May not have been intentional on his part, but just a WarBoss is the title for the leader of an Orc in Dawn of War 2. Of course, if you are a Dawn of War 2 player, I'm sure you already know that. And if not, now you do. But anyway, so the opening stages of Company of Heroes 2 games are always quite a bit slower than in Dawn of War 2. We haven't had a single engagement yet, but we can take a look at the builds. We have a double Pioneer opening as from WarBoss with a single Grenadier and a single machine gun. Now, the double Pioneer opening is something that certainly I personally, I think I generally prefer getting two Grenadiers instead of double Pioneers. But there are advantages in both directions. Getting another Grenadier squad should give you a bit more firepower, but since the Germans need to make a production building to actually get Grenadiers out, getting two Pioneers on the field is just a way to have units on the field faster, so you can start capturing resource points faster and consequently getting your economy going faster. They will also help you a bit later on when you decide to go for, basically just when you start getting vehicles. And this is a game where, in Company of Heroes 2, you pretty much will inevitably get vehicles. Basically just that you will have that repair support ready. And especially given how long it can take to repair in this game, it can actually be an inconvenience later on when you only have one Pioneer squad for repairs. So we have some engagements going on both sides. Unfortunately, this machine gun was just caught out of position, wasn't set up, and already some conscripts had gotten around it. And it looks like Vindicare is coming out on the better end of early engagements. He actually won an engagement down south, his conscripts against the Pioneers, and that allowed him to get this strategic point that's very, very close to WarBoss's base. WarBoss is, in general, his map control right now is suffering quite a bit. And Vindicare is even, again, he's really, actually this is WarBoss, just going for a decap and possibly even a capture off on this standard territory point. So in the resource model in Company of Heroes 2 is pretty curious, since it's slightly changed from from the original Company of Heroes. And there are just ways in which it's also very different from Dawn of War 2 because of those changes. So one of the interesting things is, obviously, manpower is your main resource. Much like requisition is your main resource in Dawn of War 2. Manpower is something that is actually not affected by map control. That's something that is unique to Company of Heroes 2 that is not the case in either the original Company of Heroes or Dawn of War. Obviously, in the original Company of Heroes, strategic points give you manpower. In Dawn of War 2, there are requisition points that give you requisition. Basically, in Company of Heroes 2, you just start with a a starting manpower rate of 300, which goes down as you get more units, which is, of course, what we call upkeep. So these standard territory points actually just provide you with fuel and munitions. The standard territory points give you +3 fuel and munitions, whereas the dedicated points, the dedicated fuel point gives you +7, and the dedicated munition point gives you +11. So those specialized points give you slightly more than double the resources for its specialized resource than the standard point. So your manpower income is just determined purely by how many units you already have on the field. It's basically just a fixed rate that's only affected by unit upkeep. So far it's been a pretty passive game. Vindicare was pretty overwhelming on Vindicare definitely came out on the better end of early engagements, but WarBoss is being very sneaky with this Pioneer squad, this backcapping Pioneer squad. He's actually captured a lot of territory, a lot of it very close to Vindicare's base, and Vindicare is working on getting it back, which is good for him, but it's also just delaying Vindicare a bit, since Vindicare is now spending time capturing points that are close to his base instead of having those units out further on the field to fight. We have that Flaminor for half-track from WarBoss. This Flaminor for half-track, extremely good as anti-infantry. Flames, in general, are very good in Company of Heroes 2. They are, of course, close range, and Flaminors overcome a lot of the weaknesses, or don't have a lot of the weaknesses that infantry-based flamers have, which is that they're just on a fragile unit. Oh, all right. They're on a fragile unit, and you can't fire them on the move. Here we have a 82mm mortar team from Vindicare. The Soviet actually has 2 different mortar teams. Didn't actually quite hit them. Soviets have 2 different mortar teams, whereas the Germans only have 1. One of the mortar teams that the Soviets have is a doctrinal unit. It's a call-in. It's very powerful. Although it looks like, wow, this Grenadier team needs to get off the field. This Grenadier, WarBoss, we have a Vet 1 Grenadier with only 1 model. I'm guessing WarBoss hasn't realized that he's only got this 1 model. He finally does realize it and retreats them. Now we have conscripts getting suppressed and then pinned by the MG42. So that's another very interesting thing that is slightly different in this game than in Dawn of War. In Dawn of War, there's only suppressed, and you actually still maintain the ability to direct your units in whatever direction you choose when they are suppressed. They, of course, have their reload time increased, and they move very slowly. But it's actually not quite as punishing as in this game. Wow, we just had a Pioneer squad just completely destroyed by the Shock Troop squad. But the suppression is more punishing in this game, since you don't quite fully control your units once they're suppressed. They still move a little bit, but they're not as responsive as a suppressed unit in Dawn of War 2 that will still just move in whatever direction you tell them to, albeit at a very slow rate, and not really being able to effectively fight back. And then there we saw that those units went from suppressed to pinned. When a unit gets pinned, it actually can't move at all. It's just obviously something that's very bad. And there's basically, your only choices are either to retreat, or you need to have another unit to come and flank or force off that MG. The unit that's pinned can't do pretty much anything, and you need another unit to either, to save the ass of the unit that got pinned. So if we take a bit more at the unit compositions, WarBoss went for a 5-unit tier 1, or yeah, 5-unit tier 1. He had his 2 Pioneers, 2 Grenadiers, and then a single machine gun. He now has his Panzer Grenadiers. These guys have STG-44s or MP-44s, the first assault rifle ever made. Gives them a lot of close-range firepower. But Vindicare has a lot of close-range firepower of his own in the form of these shock troops. Now, Vindicare is very low on units, which I'm surprised to see. I don't know if he lost units or if he's just gone lighter while teching more. And I'm actually inclined to believe that he's gone just lighter units, fewer units, but he's teched more. He already has he has the support weapon camp, so he has one tech building up, and he's already building the mechanized armor camp, which gives him access to the Su-85 tank destroyer, the Su-76 assault gun, as well as the Katyusha artillery rocket truck. So Vindicare, actually, he has a 100-point VP lead. And he had early map control, but I think he's sacrificed a bit of map control by deciding to go for that lighter build. He basically didn't, mostly just built tier 1 units. He has a mortar, or tier 0 units even. Looks like those conscripts are stepping on mine. We actually have an S minefield from the Germans. So the Germans have a very interesting minefield that many people are not very fond of. Instead of laying down a single mine or a single batch of mines, they lay down a mine quadrant. Basically just 4 mines spaced apart. And it even has warning signs, but Vindicare stepped on the mines anyway. A lot of people don't like these mine quadrants. The mine quadrants, first of all, it costs more. Costs quite a bit more. They actually... And they even have warning signs to basically let your opponent know that there are mines there. Now, these shock troops are rushing up. They hit a mine. Unfortunately, I think WarBoss, yeah, he needs to get those grenadiers out of there. And to be honest, he should probably get this grenadier squad out of there as well, because the shock troops, they're just so powerful in close quarters combat. They will absolutely win over shock troops. I mean, they will absolutely win over grenadiers, pioneers. I think they will even, at least full health, I think they will win over Panzer Grenadiers as well. A single shock troop, I believe, does beat a single Panzer Grenadier squad. Now, that being said, Vindicare already has this Su-76 out. This Su-76 is a very interesting unit, and I like it quite a bit. I'm not sure why it got engine damage there. Both these units have engine... And wow, that was actually... The mortar actually finished off that half-track. Now, you rarely see that. I feel like you rarely see mortars. Mortars can do damage to vehicles, but I feel like you hardly ever see them hit vehicles because they often can't hit vehicles. They all often just miss. But that Su-76 combined with that mortar managed to take out that half-track. That half-track is a very, very good unit for taking out infantry, but it's something that is very interesting in the sense that it's a unit that is very, very good when it comes out, but it scales so poorly that it's almost guaranteed to eventually die, and then once it does die, you're probably not going to even want to rebuild another one. And I say probably, they're somewhat tentative, but the actual fighting capabilities, definitely using the half-track for its fighting capabilities is definitely something that does not scale well, just because tanks ultimately come out, and it's just really hard to use the half-track when tanks are out. Now, that being said, the main scaling reasons for the half-track are actually the fact that it is a reinforcement point. Even if you get the Flammenwerfer, the Flammenwerfer removes all of the transport capacity, but you can still reinforce from a Flammenwerfer half-track. But yeah, this Su-76, it is an assault gun, it has a cannon, it can be used against light vehicles such as that half-track, and it's the kind of thing where German players will probably get half-tracks, maybe scout cars, and then basically once this Su-76 comes out, the Su-76 is really just going to threaten them and not really... Wow! That was a grenade that fully destroyed that building and killed that conscript squad inside, so Vindicare just lost a conscript to a grenade from these Panzer Grenadiers. Now, the Panzer Grenadiers, they have something called a bundled grenade. Now, that bundled grenade is expensive. It costs 45 munitions, which is quite a bit compared to, I think, just about every other grenade in the game. I think that is the most expensive grenade in the game, but it is very, very powerful.
We have finished building the bunker.
Now, WarBoss has actually gotten this Panzer IV medium tank. The Panzer IV is probably the best overall tank that the Ostheer has right now, and that's a little strange to say. There is also the Panther, there is the Tiger, but the Panzer IV is great for the combination of how good it is objectively, just in terms of the stats, its versatility in dealing with both infantry and vehicles, as well as how early you can get it and the cost you can get it at. obviously, a tank like the Panther is, at least in theory, supposed to be a bit of an upgrade, supposed to be better, especially since it's more expensive and comes out at a later tier. But all of those things actually are somewhat inconvenience. They're somewhat of an inconvenience. The fact that the Panther is more expensive and comes out of a later tech building. And it's often easier to just put multiple Panzer IVs out on the field instead of trying to tech up to Panthers. And then there is, of course, that Tiger tank, which is a Doctrine-specific tank, and WarBoss has even gotten the Doctrine where he can get the Tiger. But that is something that it takes time to get it, both in terms of the resources and the command points. Now, it looks like... Oh, so WarBoss has been a little impressive on... WarBoss has actually been very, very impressive on map control. Really, he's actually really been playing a map control game, which is very, very nice. I like to see that. It's something that is very, very important in these Relic real-time strategy games. Something that is very, very unique to Relic real-time strategy games. I mean, to some extent, map control exists in any real-time strategy game. In a game like StarCraft, you need to control things like, I guess, getting expansions and such. But it's very, very important in these Relic RTSs. And I think, in particular, the game that I had cast of Locke versus Helping Hans, I was actually very, very disappointed with Locke's lack of map control, and that he was able to beat Helping Hans on engagements and fighting, but he just didn't control the map and kind of lost because of that. So at the very least, whoever wins this matchup, I don't think WarBoss will lose because of a lack of map control. He seems to really know what he's been doing in that respect, and he's been very, very impressive. He still has a lot of map control. Right here, so that Su-76 it has like a very specific purposes, or very specific uses. It will counter pretty much any light vehicle, the Flamer half-track, the scout car, but it really can't compete with any real tank, and that's why WarBoss is just going ahead and going forward, because that Su-76 really couldn't do anything, and as long as these Panzers are around, a unit like the Su-76 can't do anything. Pretty much until Vindicare gets some kind of comparable tank that can actually fight the Panzer IV, so that the Su-76 isn't completely screwed whenever basically just whenever the Panzer IVs show up. Unfortunately, Su-76 is gone, which is kind of sad. I like the Su-76. It is very useful for dealing with those light vehicles, the Flamer half-track in particular, and it also has a free barrage ability, which is very, very good for anti-infantry. Right now, it actually looks like Vindicare is saving up for the Su-85, that is the Soviet tank destroyer, and definitely one of the best sources of anti-tank in the game. People often complain about it being too good, because it is very good. It has very long range, can take on, very easily take on any non-doctrinal tank, medium tanks such as the Panzer IV. And in fact, it's still the Su-76 from the Soviets, which Vindicare does have enough resources to build, is often still the answer even to most super tanks. The Tiger, the Elephant, actually the Elephant is really pretty much counters the Su-76s, but I mean, ultimately you still kind of have to use Su-85s to deal with something like an Elephant. You just need to actually get around it, flank it, or disable it with a T-34. But now we have these double Panzer IVs from WarBoss, which is very common play. Again, because you can just have two Panzer IVs out on the field, and if you try to do like tech up to get to Panthers, you're spending resources, taking the time. You're just taking a lot more time to get that tech building up, and waiting even longer for the resources to put a Panther out on the field, when in a way you almost don't even need to. And we see that WarBoss has actually not even he has not even put up his heavy Panzer Corps, which is the Tier 4 tech building. He's stuck with his support armor corps, the Tier 3 tech building, and that's something that right now appears to actually be very, very viable for the Ostheer. Because you can get out these Panzer IVs, you can get out multiple Panzer IVs, they're so solid, and then you can often just save the resources on that tech building. And if you really want to get out some kind of super tank, some kind of better tank, something that's an upgrade on this Panzer IV, at least in theory, you can always choose to get something, you can always choose to get a doctrinal tank, like the Elephant or the Tiger. But we do have that Su-76. The SU-70, I mean the SU-85, God, it's so hard to just remember to say the right number. The SU-85 is a tank destroyer. It's an assault gun, so it does not have a turret. So one of the ways that you deal with it is by circling around it, flanking it. Ooh, that Panzer IV is in a lot of trouble. So this is Vindicare's cue to just go up and start taking shots at that Panzer IV. And probably both of those Panzer IVs are out of range of this Su-85. One of the great things about the Su-85 is its incredible range. Unfortunately, it did not kill that Panzer IV. This Panzer IV is chasing after it, but that's not a fight it wants either. This Su-85 just so good, and with the range it has, it was really threatening both of those Panzer IVs, despite there being two of them. Now, Vindicare does have to be careful. He's leaving this Panzer IV up here without any support whatsoever. Literally no support. He's got his divisional field gun behind it. One of the things that I often like to do, at least particularly when I'm playing as Germans, is I like to have a AT gun behind, set up behind my tanks. That's especially in the case of Germans, where if you get a tank rammed by a T-34, then that T-34 is often just going right into an AT gun firing arc and often immobilizing itself in the process. Now, we don't see any T-34s from Vindicare. That is in part because he went for the mechanized armor camp instead of the tank battalion command. And, I mean, there are definitely benefits. There are definitely drawbacks and benefits to either one. I would say, I mean, there are actually definitely units coming out of both buildings that people complain are overpowered. From the... Looks like we might have a Panzer IV going down. Yeah, there goes that Panzer IV. From the mechanized armor camp, there's that Su-85. People often complain about that being overpowered for how affordable it is, as well as being just how good it is, being very effective against tanks at long range. And from the tank battalion command, I'd say there are definitely things people complain about from that. The main thing is actually the T-70, the light tank, the little baby tank, which is just very, very fast and very oppressive, and you can get very early. And to some extent, even the T-34 because of that ramming ability, which can be very, very powerful. Unfortunately, this is very bad for that field gun. Now, again, in this game, anti-tank guns cannot retreat. So as we can see, Vindicare is just trying to move it back, and he's probably going to lose all of the crew members on this field gun, and he does, in fact, lose it. So anti-tank guns are often very easy prey for very good anti-infantry units, such as these Panzer Grenadiers. So it's much more important in this game to keep your basically just to keep your field guns, your AT guns supported, because they can't retreat, and basically just means they don't have that get out of jail free card that they would have in Dawn of War. Although it's not quite, because there's so many things to consider. Retreating in general in Dawn of War isn't as much of a get-out-of-jail-free card as it is in this game. Retreating in general is a bit safer, and there's certainly exceptions to that as well, flamer units being very good on retreat. But in general, there isn't as much in this game. Company of Heroes 2, the factions don't have as much to punish retreats as strongly as there are in things in Dawn of War 2 that can very, very strongly punish retreats. So WarBoss lost one Panzer IV, and he actually just put another one on the field. Now, his original Panzer IV has a top or pintle-mounted machine gunner, and that top machine gunner is pretty nice to have. I pretty much always get that machine gunner, since I really want my Panzer IV to just be good at everything, and that's pretty much what getting that machine gunner does. It allows your Panzer IV to be very good at everything, and it's already pretty solid even without that extra machine gun, but basically just allows the Panzer IV to be very good both as anti-tank as well as anti-infantry. Unfortunately, oh man, WarBoss is about to lose both of his tanks, so very, very, not a very well-called play by WarBoss. Kind of just charging into an AT gun as well as an Su-85. I think maybe he was hoping to just go around them and then use the fact that both the Su-85 and basically just the fact that the Su-85 and the and the field gun are very vulnerable once a tank actually gets around them and just starts circling around them. I think maybe WarBoss was counting on that, but I mean, he just took too much damage on approach because there's still just a lot of AT here. The SU-85 combined with that field gun is just a lot of AT, and he just took too much damage on approach. He also got hit by an AT grenade from the conscripts, which gave one of the Panzer IVs a damaged engine and just made it easy food for both the SU-85 and the field gun. Oh, but Vindicare is now losing his infantry units. He's winning the tank battles, but he's losing the infantry fights. He lost conscripts, so he lost all of his conscripts, which is quite sad considering those conscripts really are pretty, well, they're nice. They scale a lot better if you get one of the doctrines that allow you to put PPSHs on them. They will still be very, very good even without that doctrine, to be honest, just because of the versatility they get. Being relatively cheap, having that anti-tank grenade, having anti-garrison, a lot of versatility, a lot of utility. Now, Vindicare is actually not on the winning end of VPs. And what is Vindicare getting right now? So Vindicare is actually putting that tank battalion command, so that will allow him access to these vehicles. Now, the interesting thing about those vehicles is that usually these vehicles they're actually relatively time-critical vehicles that usually don't scale terribly well. Now, there are some exceptions to that, and I don't want that to be an absolute. But they don't... Like right now, just with these Panzer IVs out, you're not really getting anything from that building to fight Panzer IVs, except for actually the T-34. And the combination of having a T-34 and an Su-85 can actually be very powerful if the T-34 rams a tank and then the Su-85 just follows up. You can actually pretty easily kill tanks that way. Vindicare, meanwhile, decrewed a German AT gun. He might lose this shock trooper squad to that strafing run from the Germans. I want to see. I think it just might be fine, but it's mainly just a question if this plane comes around and actually takes out the shock troops. Oh my God! So that plane that we see is the strafing run from the Germans. It's just a strafing run. It uses machine guns, shoots infantry, suppresses them. It is currently definitely the best of the off-map plane globals. Extremely good against infantry because of how it suppresses, because of how it just covers so much of the map. It's actually something that is generally considered pretty overpowered and probably the main thing that is a little too good for the Russians. Most complaints about overpowered or poorly balanced things in this game have been directed at the Russians. But that strafing run from the Germans is definitely something that they have that is very, very good and a little bit too good. But WarBoss is down to 1 Panzer IV. He's definitely been losing on the tank battles. Vindicare, on the other hand, losing on the infantry battles. In fact, part of what Vindicare's challenge is that he does not really have... At this point, he's lacking infantry to really support his anti-tank, or his tanks and anti-tank. And his tanks and anti-tank have almost no anti-infantry capabilities. Now, I think the main reason, actually, he chose to get that tank battalion command was to put out this half-track. This half-track, again, it's the half-track. By default, it functions as a transport and a reinforcement point. This half-track has been upgraded with quad 50 cal machine guns. Now, that does a few things. First of all, it's an anti-infantry weapon, pretty good against infantry, although I think it's better in the campaign than it is in the actual multiplayer. It also functions as anti-air, which is definitely a very interesting and unfamiliar concept for Dawn of War players. And anti-air is basically just for dealing with those plane call-ins. There's actually, when you have a unit like this, it will actually shoot at the planes that are flying around when you have a call-in like that. And you can actually shoot the plane down, and the plane can even crash down onto the ground, and depending where it lands, it can even crash on something and kill something. Very, very rare to see it actually crash on something, but although definitely not so rare to see it crash to get it shot down, period. This quad 50 cal machine gun, it also has very long range, as we can see, and it even suppresses. So you actually have a vehicle, a light vehicle though, that is very mobile and can even suppress. WarBoss has very good map control at this point. He's got 2 VPs, being very oppressive on the sides. WarBoss also has 2 of the fuel points, so that's part of the challenge that Vindicare is dealing with. He doesn't have much fuel, and fuel is very important for putting vehicles on the field. You don't need any fuel whatsoever to put infantry on the field, but you do need it for those tanks. Let's take a look at WarBoss with all the fuel that he has. He's actually, again, just choosing to... He's building another Panzer IV, just choosing to put more Panzer IVs out on the field. And it is a very interesting choice, just because of how easily you can put so many of these Panzer IVs out on the field, and you just have multiple tanks, which basically just weighing the cost and consequence of getting a single tank, a single very powerful tank, versus these less powerful tanks, but you can get more of them. It's like that time in the office where the guy says, would you rather have all-you-can-eat pretty good pizza or a little bit of a very good pizza? Which is a reference that I think a lot of people will probably not get, but that's just what I thought of. But anyway, WarBoss. Now, one of the things I think WarBoss is struggling with, he might be having a little trouble with reinforcement costs. He doesn't have too much manpower left. He's about to reinforce these Panzer Grenadiers. And this half-track is actually proving to be a pretty good choice in a lot of ways, I think. Since the gap in Vindicare's army was actually, he didn't have enough anti-infantry. And part of that meant that his Su-85 and his divisional field gun could get very easily rushed by Panzer Grenadiers and even regular Grenadiers. And that would also, and one of the other great things is that right there we saw that because of this half-track, Vindicare was actually very, very easily able to scare off those Grenadiers trying to step into this victory point capture zone. And Vindicare really has like very few units, or relatively few, less than WarBoss. But he has a very nice composition. It's a very efficient composition. That is really taking care of all of his needs. He's got this incredibly powerful anti-tank in the form of the Su-85 and the field gun. Very powerful anti-tank and very efficient, again, because only 2 sources. As well as anti-infantry, mostly just in the form of the conscripts. This half-track, and to some extent also this T-34. Oh! And that was actually, wow, what was that? That was the fragmentation bomb from WarBoss, and he actually took out, oops, I did not intend to pause it. He actually took out quite a few of Vindicare's, he actually took out a few of Vindicare's units. Actually, he mainly just took out the combat engineers. And now WarBoss is doing some interesting tricks. He's driving around with his Panzer IVs, just driving around with them. Where is that field gun? Now I think the field gun should maybe try to head them off, maybe go in this direction where the half track is, instead of chasing those Panzer IVs in the same direction as the Su-85, as well as the T-34. Since if anything, Vindicare almost seems to have panicked a little bit, and WarBoss has actually been kind of running circles around him. Vindicare, and especially Vindicare, alright, he has 1 repair unit on the field, he has 1 squad of combat engineers, he's actually building another one, and I think he's doing that in part because he's now has 3 vehicles on the field. He's relying heavily on his vehicles, particularly this half-track. Really relying on that to support his Su-85, as well as to keep those strafing runs in check. And already we have a Vet 3 Su-85, so whenever units get veterancy in this game... Oh, and I don't like this. I think Vindicare needs to... Well, I mean, he has his AT gun set up somewhere. He might want to put it in a slightly better position. Or at least I'm saying better in terms of I'm expecting a WarBoss to move his tanks through the middle. Although he's already proven that he's not going to be too just straightforward with how he uses his tanks. Now this is tricky. Vindicare is capturing with his combat engineers. Now he could even put the Su-85 in that capture zone and have those combat engineers capture the point while repairing at the same time. This capture zone stuff has definitely opened up a lot of possibilities in terms of things like being able to capture with a unit and have it being in cover instead of being completely exposed, being able to capture with a setup team that is set up. You can actually have a machine gun that is ready to fire, ready to suppress while also capturing. Now, WarBoss definitely gotten a decent amount of AT of his own. He does have those Panzer IVs. Their cannons are reasonable anti-tank, although they really don't have the range of a unit like the Su-85, which is one of the main reasons they struggle in that respect. And, ooh, we have a precision bombing strike coming out of Vindicare. And is that going to be... Wow. So I think, I mean, he... Vindicare did that and completely destroyed that anti-tank gun, which is not bad. Just that he instantly took out that anti-tank gun, and it not only kills the crew members, but it kills the entire gun. So WarBoss would have to pay another 360 manpower to put a new anti-tank gun on the field. Which is that actually really does hurt WarBoss a lot, since WarBoss is already on the weaker end of anti-tank, and he's now got a lot of tanks to deal with. We have 2 T-34s as well as the Su-85. This is actually a very, very bad position for WarBoss, because with 2 T-34s, this means that he can choose to use both T-34s, have them ram both of the Panzers. And then once they're rammed, there really is nothing that WarBoss would be able to do if Vindicare actually moves up with both the Su-85 and his divisional field gun. That being said, we have a different tank out. We have a third tank out. We have the Stug. I'm surprised to see him get a Stug. I mean, if he had actually not purchased the Stug, he would actually almost be at the resources where he could put out a Tiger tank. Although some people say that right now the Tiger is not really that good. It certainly is definitely going to have a lot of armor, and probably would still be, at least once it's on the field, it would probably be better than the Stug, although the Stug is obviously a lot easier to field given its cost. And now this is very nice. WarBoss being pretty smart. He's catching an isolated T-34, and he's driving his Panzer IVs right up to it. He should actually, yeah, just go right up to it so it cannot ram. And that's Vindicare is actually just going to straight up lose one of his T-34s. So actually very smart by WarBoss, pouncing on an isolated T-34. That's going to remove a lot of the threats that basically just make things a little bit safer for his Panzer IV, since there's only one T-34 that can ram now. Now, in the middle of all that, WarBoss actually lost his Stug already. And unfortunately, one of the things that's not so good about the Stug is that it really just loses straight up to this Su-85, and the Su-85 already is at Vet 3. Now, I was about to talk about this Vet 3 Su-85 before I kind of got sidetracked by something else. But the Su-85 at Vet 1, it gets the tracking ability. I don't remember what that does, but at Vet 2 it gets an increase in weapon damage and an increase in durability, and then at Vet 3 it gets an even bigger increase in durability. So the Su-85 is already a very, very good unit. And it's interesting that Vindicare is kind of just staying in the middle. And WarBoss is actually just using that to just deal with some of Vindicare's isolated units. Now down in the bottom, Vindicare was also trying to go for this bottom VP, but unfortunately for him, WarBoss also has a Vet 3 Grenadier squad, so WarBoss definitely has some unit preservation, but he should probably retreat this Panzer Grenadier. Oh no! Oh man, that single Vet 3 Panzer Grenadier just got wiped by that cannon from T-34-85. Unfortunately, again, the positioning on this T-34 a little exposed, and I think Vindicare is going for the ram now, and he actually pulls it off. I thought maybe if WarBoss had just continue to drive backwards with that T-34, he would have been able to prevent it from getting rammed and even take out the T-34 before losing it. As it is, he's going to lose his Panzer IV. He really does not stand a chance, in fact. And that could really be game for WarBoss. He's lost all of his Panzer IVs. He's getting a Stug, but it's not going to be enough. And especially since I mean, he's been doing a decent job of trying to catch units isolated, which is probably pretty much what he has to do. And we already have a Panzerschreck upgrade on these Panzer Grenadiers just right in the moment. That was probably an opportunity upgrade, just realizing that he has Panzer Grenadiers in a situation where against 2 tanks with very limited ability to protect themselves. But unfortunately, we have another T-34 here, and those Panzer Grenadiers are not going to be able to finish the job. They're going to start losing models. They actually do finish off the T-34, but I don't think that's going to be enough. And now, oh, he lost 1 member. Can this T-34 finish off that last one? Oh, nope. It decides instead to start going for the Stug. And the Stug is going to get rammed? Yes, it does. Now, this puts the T-34 in certainly not a good position, but at this point, WarBoss is struggling so much that it's actually probably not going to matter. Because when you ram a vehicle, the T-34 that you use to ram gets its main gun destroyed, and it also gets immobilized. The vehicle that got rammed also gets its main gun destroyed, but it only gets a damaged engine, so it's not immobilized. Now, the Stug has been repaired, might even take out the T-34-76, but it's probably also going to get taken out itself by the Su-85, and I think that's exactly what's going to happen. Because it's just 3 hits from that Su-85. This really has to be it. Well, I mean, it feels like it has to be it for WarBoss. He's lost so much. So many tanks. And we have a Panzer IV that is going for that Su-85, but I don't even know if that's a good idea. Except for the fact that Vindicare is exposing the rear armor of the Su-85, which I think is terrible. I think he's going to lose this Su-85 when he probably wouldn't even have to. If he had used the reverse function on the Su-85 to have it go backwards, I think he would actually I think he would not have lost that Su-85. I think the Su-85 could have just won straight up. Basically, one of the things that's very, very good about Company of Heroes 2 is that it has a new command that allows vehicles to reverse. So if you're ever frustrated in Dawn of War 2 where you're just microing your units, just right-clicking, especially a vehicle, and it just shows its rear armor, and at a time where you really, really don't want it to, and you really, really need it to not show its rear armor, they found an answer for that. There's basically just a command. It's in the... We actually see it right here, the reverse move. And whenever you do that, your tank is just guaranteed to actually just move backwards. And that's just, it's very, very good, just making things, giving you more options for micro, giving you more control, and making it so that you can keep your units just driving backwards at a time where that's where you really need it. Especially in Company of Heroes 2, where you have units like these assault guns, which don't have turrets, so they can't turn their gun that much. But even for the turreted tanks, you want that so that you're not exposing rear armor. But yeah, at this point it looks like Vindicare is probably going to have this game. I think one of the things I wanted to mention before that I didn't really get to mention, just got sidetracked again by things, was that Vindicare used this IL-2 precision bombing strike on a single pack. And that was something that, in some ways, it could have been used for more, especially that precision bombing strike is expensive. It's 200 munitions, but it's extremely, extremely good. It's definitely one of the best aerial strikes in the game. And I said that before about the German strafing run, and they're both two of the best in the game, but for very different reasons. Now, this aerial strike, this IL-2 bombing strike, is very good. It's very good for killing vehicles, especially vehicles that have had their engines damaged or disabled. And you can take out a very serious tank like an elephant or a tiger with it. But it also just has, with the area of effect, you can also take out a lot more things than just a single AT gun. So Vindicare he used that bombing run on not much. He definitely didn't use it to its full potential. If he had a situation where he could get like a damaged or destroyed engines on the Panzer IVs, could have been much juicier, gotten a lot more things. I've certainly got some very juicy shots with this bombing strike. But he did that at a time where WarBoss was relying on that pack for AV, and then taking out that pack, WarBoss really just did not have sufficient AV. So we have another German strafing run. But at this point, I'd say it really feels like WarBoss is just fighting it out. I mean, I'd hate to count people out too early, and I have a habit of doing that, of calling things too early, and WarBoss is actually getting a double cap. On Vindicare's side, I was surprised to see him give up that that half track. And that may actually be helping WarBoss a lot, because that half track was keeping this plane in check, this plane that is now strafing. And Vindicare he's not on the field enough, I feel like. And he's also getting his infantry suppressed. And Vindicare just needs to get on some of those points. And, he just has a fighting force that is going to win over WarBoss's forces for the most part. But he's actually really having trouble with that strafing run because it just suppresses units. And it's almost like you can't really... One of the things that's so good about that strafing run is that, for the most part, you can't really dodge it. It just goes everywhere and just suppresses everything. Supposedly it even suppresses and kills units in retreat. So it's something they definitely need to take a look at. And here we have shock troops in cover. Unfortunately, they are going to beat those Panzer Grenadiers, especially the Oh! So very, very nicely played by Vindicare. Vindicare threw a grenade on approach. Really just gave them the edge in a battle that they were actually already winning. And WarBoss tried to throw a grenade, but Vindicare saw it coming and he got out of the way. Now, this shock troop grenade, it's 30 munitions. It's not as good as that Panzer Grenadier grenade, but Vindicare just straight up had the better micro in that engagement. We have another similar engagement right here, and Vindicare, again, not falling for those grenades. Or actually, let's take a look at WarBoss. Oh, no, that was actually Vindicare throwing the grenade. But unfortunately, the Panzer Grenadiers are just not winning over the shock troops anyway. Unfortunately for WarBoss, and it's now a triple cap for Vindicare, so he's certainly in a very, very strong position. He's getting out another Panzer IV, or at least WarBoss is. I don't remember who I was talking about. But Vindicare, he still has a single Su-85. He even has a howitzer, which apparently he was actually using it, but at this point it's mostly a novelty, maybe just to shoot at units that are going back into base. But it's certainly not looking good for WarBoss at this point. His best chance would actually be to abandon this Panzer IV. Oh, and I was going to say, use those Pioneers to either capture or at least get a decap on this VP. Unfortunately, he lost both that Panzer IV and the Pioneers. So now he's sending just some regular Grenadiers, apparently. And he's going to concede. Realize that at that point he was pretty much done. So, yeah. Hope you enjoyed the cast. Have a good night.